Good evening. Welcome to the October 18th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. We're glad you're here with us, whether it's in chambers tonight or on TV at home. As is our custom, we'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Here.
Commissioner Cullivaney,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover.
Here.
Welcome, everybody. Good to have everybody here together. Item 3 on our agenda tonight is a proclamation. We do these periodically to highlight groups, activities, or causes. In this case, we're kind of one of our own. We have a university here in town, Midwestern University, and we have a pharmacy proclamation tonight. Whereas pharmacy is one of the oldest of the health professions concerned with the health and well-being of all people. Whereas the first celebration of National Pharmaceutical Week was held from October 11th through 17th, 1925, when radio stations across the country broadcast special programs which emphasized the professional side of pharmacy. Whereas in 2004, American Pharmacist Month was launched to allow more time to promote the expanding role of the pharmacist. Whereas there are over 327,000 pharmacists licensed in the United States providing services to assure the rational and safe use of all medications. Whereas pharmacists are specifically educated with a focus and level of expertise on medication therapy that exceeds that of other healthcare providers and are ideally suited to work collaboratively with other healthcare team members and patients to improve medication use and outcomes by providing services through medication therapy management. Whereas, as our healthcare system and the demands placed on it change, pharmacists have stepped up and continued to provide direct patient care, playing a crucial role in informing, supporting, and comforting patients. Whereas the American Pharmacists Association and the Illinois Pharmacists Association have declared October as American Pharmacists Month. Whereas Downers Grove's own Midwestern University Chicago College of Pharmacy graduates approximately 200 qualified pharmacists yearly who go on to enter the healthcare system and practice patient-centered care. Now therefore I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim October 2022 as American Pharmacists Month in the Village of Downers Grove, and urge all our citizens to acknowledge the valuable services of pharmacists who provide safe, affordable, beneficial pharmaceutical care services and products to all citizens, and to take a moment to simply say thank you to your pharmacist. Dated this October, 18th day of October 2022 at Downers Grove, Illinois. We have a few members of Midwestern University. Come on down.
Interesting twist.
You guys flip that around.
Sorry about that. A little bit more.
Keep coming. There we go. Perfect.
Perfect. All right. Mayor Barnett, commissioners, and residents of Downers Grove, on behalf of the American Pharmacists Association, Academy of Student Pharmacists at the Midwestern University College of Pharmacy, Downers Grove, I thank you for proclaiming October as American Pharmacists Month. The purpose of this proclamation is to recognize the service of pharmacists in the community. Pharmacists are the most accessible healthcare professionals, and they can provide health screenings, immunizations, and medication therapy management, among many other services. As medication experts, pharmacists reduce the number of people who end up in the hospital, provide the best therapy recommendations for those who are hospitalized, decrease the number of medication-related errors, and improve patient outcomes. We have seen the role of pharmacists greatly expand since the onset of COVID-19. Pharmacists are now allowed to administer vaccines in all 50 states and have played a vital role for treating infected patients. Some states, including Illinois, are expanding prescribing rights that allow pharmacists to provide disease state management for diabetes, high cholesterol and blood pressure, heart failure, COPD, and many more. Additionally, our chapter has consistently provided free clinics that allow patients to get their blood pressure and blood glucose taken by student pharmacists and receive counseling on their medications. We recently have added a branch to our clinics called the Morning Star Mission in Joliet, where we are paired with the American Association of Psychiatric Pharmacists. In addition to medical screenings, we provide mental health resources for housing insecure patients. Lastly, we are still giving our students opportunities to become leaders in healthcare. For example, our naloxone administration training program is continuing to grow. Students are training other graduate schools on how to administer this life-saving opioid reversal drug, while educating on the severity of addiction. At the end of the day, it is so important to recognize the care that we are capable of providing to our patients and community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. All right, we will move on. Thank you all for being here. Item 4 on our agenda tonight is minutes of previous council meetings. Is there a motion concerning previous minutes?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the October 11, 2022 minutes and the executive session minutes from October 11, 2022 as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council? Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Culvaney?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. Is there a motion concerning a consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Culvaney?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That too passes unanimously. Before we move on to our active agenda, I have a few comments. Some of you have been here, you've heard these, others it may be your first time, but it has to do with decorum and how we are going to conduct our public comments portion of our meetings. We've had a couple of meetings in the past, not too distant past, where we've lost sight of some basic decorum and mutual respect. We're counting on everyone here to not let that happen tonight. Public comment portions of our meetings are important and valued parts of each council meeting. There are provisions in the agenda for such input at each active and first reading agenda item, as well as later on items not specific to an active or first reading agenda topic under the public comments portion of the agenda. Beyond tonight's meeting, there are plenty of opportunities to engage council members, including our e-remarks system, the CRC system, Coffee with the Council, direct email, and by phone. Every one of your council members spends time in person off this dais making themselves available to residents and businesses across the community. Those one-on-one conversations are often the most valuable. Applause or heckling is not acceptable, whether it be for something said from the dais or a comment delivered to the council. Your council is listening, we're taking notes, considering what is said. Often, and rightly, some time is needed to reflect on the comments presented to us. That same consideration is expected of everyone in the room. Applause or heckling just diminishes the effect of the comments and diminishes everyone's ability to consider them. Importantly, the opportunity to address the council is not an opportunity to name call, accuse others of ill will, or debate one another. If we can't follow the rules, if we can't exhibit this kind of decorum and respect for each other, we'll have to stop the meeting. If you plan to speak, please do keep a few things in mind. Please state your name for the record. Please address your comments to me as the chair of the meeting. Keep comments to 5 minutes or less. Avoid repeating what others have already said. Please keep your comments to 1 visit to the podium per subject. And remember that comments are most effective when they focus on subjects within the scope of Downers Grove governance. Finally, if you forget to mention something or additional conversation brings up a new idea, please hold that until after the meeting and use one of the other contact methods. to contact us as needed or bring that new comment to our next meeting. With that, we will continue with the active agenda. Is there an ordinance concerning Chapter 26 of the Downers Grove Code?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Downers Grove Municipal Code as presented.
Second.
Are any comments or questions from the audience on this item? Comments or questions from the council? Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye, that motion passes unanimously. Is there a motion concerning amending the zoning ordinance?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the Village of Downers Grove, Illinois, to designate the property at 4915, 4919, and 4923 Main Street Apartments, as planned unit development number 67, as presented.
Second. Sorry.
Any comments or questions from the audience on this agenda item?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Vincent Barrett. I live at 4921 Highland Avenue. Again, I thank you for your service. I wasn't aware that this was going to be voted on this evening. I'm not sure if I'm speaking prior to you voting on the second that was just made. So is that what's happening?
So, hang on one second, Vince, I'll just
sure.
give a little broader description.
Thank
So
you.
the active agenda portion of our meeting, I should have introduced this probably, are the items which we plan to take action on tonight. These are items which have been discussed at least once prior. The council generally will make a motion. If that motion is seconded, it becomes available to the floor for discussion. That's the point where we also take comments from the audience. In this case, this motion was made and seconded. First thing we're going to do is hear from the audience, any comments they have, then there'll be some discussion up here, then there may or may not be a vote on it. Some people can also table subjects. So,
One other point of clarification, if I may, before I start my 5 minutes. There are three related items here.
yes.
So do I speak now or after you covered the three items?
There will be an opportunity to speak at each item. Everybody can speak on each item. I would encourage people not to say the same thing over and over again.
Sure.
But at each agenda item, we will have a fresh new opportunity for everyone to speak.
Okay, thank you. So again, I'm Vincent Barrett, 4921 Highland Avenue, taxpayer. I'm involved in the community. I have been for years. I love this community. My comments would relate to any one of these three, so I'm speaking now after the first one. I was able to attend the Plan Commission meetings, which were very interesting. And one of the things that came up in that meeting that piqued my interest was, I think it was item number 6, what is in the best interest of the residential community? And that was touched on, especially in the second meeting. The second meeting found that the Plan Commission decided not to support this proposal by the petitioner, and it's here. Okay, so it's here. I've gone back through my notes, and I've looked at all the different notes that I took, and I haven't done as much research as everyone here and everybody else in the room. But what I keep hearing are concessions and consequences. I don't hear consequences, I hear concessions, and concessions relate to DB, PDU, setbacks, fences, height, in a neighborhood where there are residential homes. But I don't hear a lot of touch on consequences, unless it comes from this podium. And that's where I'm coming from today. What I'm asking you to do, as I did at the prior meeting, is again, to put yourself in my position, in the position who absolutely oppose this development. I'm for development. I've got a couple ideas for that property. That's not relevant today. No one's asked me, and I'm not speaking about that. But I'm for development and for progress. This is a great community. Many things have been done. What the petitioner is forwarding And this wave has been building for a long, long time, and now we're at the 9th hour where the citizens get to speak. And we're running out of time. And what I'm asking you to do is put yourself in my position. I'll give you an example. If this wasn't my neighborhood, if it wasn't my front yard, I'm right across the street from this, and any one of you, or the petitioner, any one of you called me up and said, hey, Vince, you know, you don't know me, this is what's happening, they're going to put this in my backyard, let me tell you a little bit about it. And he said, would you come and support me? I would come and support you on that. That's how I look at these things. This is not one of those not in my backyard issues. I look at this as a community, and this does not have a place in our community. So what I'd like you to do, in all of our guts, we know what is right, what is wrong, and what momentum is there. And there's a lot of momentum to this. So I ask you kindly to consider where I live, where this neighborhood is, and what it will do to it. I'm absolutely opposed to the proposal as it's been made to date. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening. Jeremy Schliga, 4932 Highland Avenue. Mr. Mayor and the entire Village Council, we thank you for your time and consideration when it comes to this development and are grateful for the changes that have already been incorporated into the petition. As a community, we have come together throughout this process to try and shape the development that will ultimately define our neighborhood. Collectively, we embrace change in our community and we accept the development as a critical part of economic growth, as long as it is done respectfully. We maintain that it is not us, the neighbors, who are asking for exceptions here. We remain steadfast in our opposition to the many exceptions that are being asked for. We have not wavered on our asks to the following of zoning requirements defined by the Village of Downtown Business Development abuts residential properties. Those zoning ordinances do not differentiate between above and below grade. The underground parking structure is set way too close to the property lines of our neighbors. These zoning ordinances are in place to provide public safety, welfare, and health. 65% of this proposed development borders residential zone properties and should be considered within this context. We also feel that in allowing this exception, we have grave concern for the loss of a soil and its impact on stormwater drainage. In addition, the underground setbacks are relevant to protecting the trees that line the perimeter of the properties. We also maintain while these properties, as of 2005, have been zoned as DB, the 2017 comprehensive plan regards this area as transition. The petitioner himself several times refers to this in his petition. As we all know, the transition area should buffer nearby residential areas from taller and denser developments. These buildings should also be respectful of the height of the surrounding neighborhoods. This is why we have continued to push for the 36-foot height and limitation as well. Even in staff's answers to the questions posed by Village Council, all of their examples of where business district is in such close proximity to the residential, the height of the surrounding buildings is consistently lower on all of their examples. Of these, only one example is a direct comparison to the proposal at hand, the southwest corner of Maple and Main, where DB abuts R5 and R4. Similarly, this is the only other section coming out of downtown that does not have a DT zone to transition. It goes directly from DB to R zone properties. Even in this scenario, the building is only 2 stories. With the exceptions needed by the petitioner, the examples provided by staff regarding the similarly zoned areas concerned over trees aligning the properties, the groundwater and concerns brought forth by the public at large, we implore you to not accept this development as presented and instead take this opportunity to shape the development of Main Street in a way that better represents the vision set forth in the 2017 comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, Joe Burkett, 4804 Highland. Jeremy stole pretty much every point that I wanted to make, so I'll respect the mayor's wishes and not repeat all of those. I just want to say that development doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. It doesn't have to be winners and losers. And done right, it's win-win-win for everyone, the city, the immediate neighbors, the developer, the tax base, everything. The development as proposed needs special approval, and the development as proposed, I believe, and I think the neighbors believe, are going to impact our property values. There's already a property for sale on Highland that is having trouble sale, that's had an offer pulled because of this development. We suppose because of this development. We've proposed compromises where the height is respected. We ask that if we're going to do a special approval, that we do something smaller scale that blends into the neighborhood, that also increases the tax base and brings foot traffic and everything else the council wants to do. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Stephen Jagailo, 4908 Highland, 4913 Maine. Been a Downers Grove resident for 34 years and a business owner for 34 years. First of all, I want to thank you for your service to Downers Grove. Throughout this process, I know that it's been almost beaten into our heads that this block, the east side of Maine between Rogers and Franklin, is zoned downtown business. Just want to give you a little context. I bought my home in 1996, and I bought my office in 2000. Both of those properties share a property line with 4915 Maine. I've been involved in the village in watching B2 to DB. I was involved in the first TIF district because my original office was at 5329 Maine. I've been involved in the special service area, and also back in 2017 and 2018 when the downtown regulatory framework was being redone and formalized, downtown core was being added. I went to all the meetings. I had communication with the staff. And at that time, ultimately, the council decided, let's keep it downtown business because the businesses that were on that block were all permitted use under downtown business. Had it been downtown transition, there'd have been special use. Now, understand, for all those years it's been downtown business, but there's been scrutiny through every step because this is a special, unique block. There's only one other place in downtown Downers, the southwest corner of Maple and Maine. We've heard about it. So that's why we need to understand that we need to take care with developing this block. Now, we accept as neighbors that it's downtown business. We bought there, we know that we're adjacent to downtown business, so we're willing to abide by the downtown business zoning requirements. Now, in 2017, 2018, I had a conversation with Stan Popovich, and we talked about DT versus DB, and he said, you know what, no one's going to come in here under DB and be able to build a 70-foot tall building 40 feet deep. No one's going to want to do that. And you know what, today that's the same, especially with people working at home remotely. We're not going to have an office building built there. And it's been almost insinuated that that's a threat, that if we don't back down from what the developer wants to do, that's what's going up there. And I don't believe that. I wasn't aware of the PUD or the special use at the time in 2017, 2018. I don't think that that was important for me to understand. But now I think I have a little better handle. And what that handle is it's a tool for you as the council to be able to have oversight and control over developments. Now, I understand that there's some times that you don't have that control. You are legally bound by the zoning requirements, and you open yourself up to problems if you deviate from there. But in this case, you have a chance for oversight and control. Now, a lot of things have happened development-wise here in Downers Grove, and there are a lot of people who are not happy with it. But this is your opportunity for redemption. This is your legacy. You can make something work here. This can be good for the developer as well as for the people on Highland Avenue. I just would ask that you keep in mind that you represent us, residents, okay? We shouldn't be fighting developers coming in here that one-off want to develop property, whether they live here or not. I want you to put yourself in our shoes. I know that all the commissioners have been out to visit Highland Avenue, and we really appreciate that. That shows us that you care. But just put yourself in our shoes. We're invested here, and we want the best development for the block. We're not against development. Thank you.
Thank you. Others on this item?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Louise Kelly. I would like to talk to the council about an initiative of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus called the Greenest Region Compact.
Hey, Louise? Can you please hold that till a little later in the meeting?
Yes.
What we're doing right now are comments on this specific item. There will be a point in the meeting later where we have comments on anything not on an agenda.
Got it. Thank you.
Others on this agenda item?
I'll be very brief because Marshall Schmidt, 4923 Sealy. I'll be very brief. People who have spoke on the issues have spoken eloquently about the reasons why you should reject this item. I just want to add to the chorus, however, that this is not a NIMBY issue, that I do not live in this neighborhood, I do not have property adjacent or near to this area. It will affect me because the traffic on Warren and Prairie are going to increase dramatically, I believe, and the problems on Main Street. But this is a village issue. This is a question that transcends the neighborhood and transcends the immediate impact that it has on the neighbors. It really is a question of what is your vision of the village and whether or not buildings of this size and magnitude belong in residential districts. And by approving this, you'll be setting a precedent for other neighborhoods that have a similar layout and a similar proximity to downtown business and other zoning areas. So I really ask you to take that into account and do not consider this to be a NIMBY issue, because it really is not, and you'll be speaking volumes to this village if you approve this, this proposal. Thank you.
Others on this agenda item?
Please comment, is it possible to do a PowerPoint presentation? I would like to speak now.
We don't have a good way of doing that without some heads up. I guess we should try. Do you have anything that, what do you have? I mean, you have like a thumb drive or something? Yeah, it's a big deal, so we'll try and accommodate it. It would be a lot better to have some heads up on that. Please take it to the end of the table over there. Give it to the guy with the glasses, and he will try and pull that together.
Yeah, hello, my name is Ian Ogden. You guys know me, I've been here before. But yeah, I just wanted to mention like one small thing is that this is obviously a decision that it requires a lot of gravity. It's a huge change for this neighborhood, and I think that one of the things that concerns me is that there's not been more like time and scrutiny given to it. I feel like to have a first reading and then have the vote where we are going to set it in stone the very next week is kind of hasty, if you ask me. It just seems as if maybe there should be more investigation into the details and the claims that have been made by the petitioner. I think that some of these claims maybe deserve a little bit more scrutiny here than they've been given, so that's kind of my biggest concern. Is it's just very rushed, it seems. The other minor thing I was going to say is with the lot lines, with the underground parking garage being so close to the lot lines, you have to consider root structures of trees in the neighboring lots. So I know with property lot lines, obviously, different property, but if you have a tree, even if the tree on top isn't that big, the root structure may be very large and may be negatively impacted by this underground structure. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. You make that work, Mike? Okay.
Good afternoon, Council. Thank you for your support, and hopefully, I sent an email with a document that this is kind of an abbreviated version, so I don't know if you all read that or not, but I wanted to start out by just saying, Brian Barbado, 4924 Highland Avenue. I back up to the proposed building development there. I've lived there for 22 years. My brother lives on Gilbert Avenue. My parents, my sister, we got 3 generations at Downers Grove North. Vince and the neighbors here for, they've all been there longer than me. So 22, 23 years, and they've been there longer. So a couple of points I wanted to make is the infrastructure is kind of the cart before the horse, right? So if we wanted to call the proposed building, the cart, then the horse might be the infrastructure. This pole on the left there is the very back of my property. I don't know if anybody could actually draw, a power line pole that is in worse condition or as much of a shambles as that. I took some pictures going up between the properties, heading northbound between the residences on Highland and also the businesses on Main, and that's what we're faced with. So that's what's existing, that's what's there right now, and really those lines need to be buried, and okay, well, who cares, right? Maybe we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so let's back up. Okay, so if we back up one, I'll get to this in a second. Realistically, the building has no way to get a ComEd truck behind it that's proposed. There's pedestrian walkways on each side. So at some point, when everybody needs EVs and 220 volts in all their houses, and the basement of the proposed structure has 20 outlets for charging stations, that infrastructure needs to be updated. So it'll need to be updated at some point. And if you can't get a ComEd truck behind the proposed building, how are we going to do it? Through my backyard? Through the other residents' backyard? What about maintenance of the building? There isn't such thing as a building that doesn't require maintenance. They need painted, they need windows replaced, they need tuck pointing done, they need caulking done, and so forth, right? So I don't understand how we can construct a building that prohibits the infrastructure from being updated and also from ever being maintained on the backside that we have to look at. I put a real-world traffic study in here. I read the 100-page dissertation traffic study that was in the petitioner's document, and there's nothing in there about a train. There's nothing in there about what the proposed impact of a dozen cars turning left heading southbound on Main Street into the underground parking garage would look like. This is from left to right. A morning walk to Starbucks for me, which I do every day from my house pretty much. I'm ashamed to admit it. I go over there and I get my Starbucks and I go home and I work from home when I'm not traveling. The first one is outside of Starbucks. You can see the line of cars. The next one I decided, okay, I'll walk past the Barrier 3 properties on Main Street and up to Franklin and over and back down to my house. So you can see the first one, cars lined all the way up. The second one, cars lined all the way up. And it's really hard to see, but they're backed all the way up to Franklin Street, okay? And I joke with my brother who lives on Gilbert. When he comes to visit or I go to visit him, right, there's always a train, okay? So the 15-minute traffic study Was it done when a freight train was going? 2 loaded coal trains, 2 unloaded coal trains, and countless Metras and Amtraks run through here. You have emergency vehicles, you have dining in the streets, so there's all kinds of potential traffic impacts that weren't taken into consideration with this study. So you can see as we walk up the street, I walk up the street, if you go to the next one, there's 3 more, right? So just continuing up the street, you see the Adams building there with the, I'll just say ridiculous sign on the front of it. Let's keep going, go to the next one. Moving up towards Franklin now, you see the traffic is still backed up. You see a truck turning left onto Main Street, which would be blocking ambulance traffic. You see a landscaping truck there. And then I turned around, or across the street, going back towards my house, and took a picture going the other direction, and you can still see the same vehicles. So this is like a 10-minute walk for me, 5 minutes. I walk slow, right? I don't walk fast unless a big dog's chasing me. So I walk slow, and this is the real world traffic study, right? Not the one that, you know, anybody can get paid for with whatever results they want. Next slide. Unfortunately, I know too much about groundwater because I had to spend 10 years trying to get my basement dry over on Highland Avenue. The foundations of the houses that are directly adjacent to the proposed building are made of what? Does anybody in here know what they're made of even? Stone. Not concrete, stone. No sump pumps. They didn't build sump pumps. They didn't even have concrete in the basements back when these houses were built. We're talking 1800s, 1908. Stone, you can read the thing, right? You know, stone is you know, more susceptible to erosion. It's more susceptible to cracking. It's more susceptible to seepage. It's more susceptible to leaking. It's more susceptible to mold and unhealthy living conditions in our homes. So groundwater is an important aspect. And the biggest thing to me that the Planning Commission just wanted to rubber stamp was this gigantic excavation of an underground parking garage that I don't even know how, you know, the square footage of it. I tried to calculate some of it based on, you know, how hard it is with the parcels, like start at this point and then go 110 feet north and whatever, and the one jets out or whatever. So my numbers probably aren't 100% accurate up here, but it's a massive excavation of 3 combined lots. That's what it is, right? So we're talking about not gallons of water, but we're talking about acre feet of water. The first foot over an acre is 158,400 square feet of water. That's what's stored in the top level. We're going to excavate 12 feet down. How much water is that? People go, oh, clay doesn't absorb water. Yes, it does. It also slows the movement of groundwater and directs the movement of groundwater. There's been a complete lack of engineering study for the proposed site and the surrounding properties. Okay, there should be soil borings, soil samplings. There should be a drill rig out there. We should know the porosity of the soil. We should know the load-bearing capacity of the soil 3 feet from my property line when we want to build a skyscraper. We don't know any of those things, or at least I don't know any of those things, because none of that information is available to me. I think we need to go back to a feasibility study. Is this even feasible to build this building?
Wrap it up, please.
Okay, all right, let's roll through it pretty quickly, okay? Stormwater, everybody knows stormwater. Stormwater is a concern. Basically, we're putting a lid on a parking garage and we're going to slope it towards my property. It's the world's biggest patio. I'm sure you guys have heard about, like, hey, his sump pump's ejecting on my yard, or it's too close, or whatever. We're talking about 5,060 square foot patio, basically. Impermeable surface. This is not green space. This is a lid on a parking garage that's going to be sloped away from the petitioner's property towards all of ours. The vault and the capacity of the vault and the gallons per minute it can handle, not available, no information available. Is it designed for an average rainfall? Is it designed for a 1 in 10 year event? I don't know. Okay, let's get to the fun stuff. Quick pictures, run through.
Right, hey,
Today was a pretty day, so yeah, go ahead.
Getting to the fun stuff doesn't sound like getting to the end.
Okay, we're getting to the end. Real quick here, you can see some pretty pictures. I just wanted to show you Highland Avenue today. I got in my car, went for a ride. It's beautiful. First picture, looking up the street, trees. Next picture, historic house moved from the Tivoli location. The next picture, Vince's beautiful craftsman-style home. Next slide, please. On and on. In the comprehensive plan, Jeremy's property, my property to the right, you can see all of the sky. The sky will be gone. Next slide, please. More, right? Historic charm. I have on my wall in my house, I have the historic homes, right? All the different types of historic homes. 4 squares, prairie-style homes, craftsman-style homes, and they're all represented on Highland Avenue. It's like an architectural tour when you walk down our street. What's not on my pop chart framed in my living room of historic houses is the petitioner's building. Nothing close, actually. It's the thing that does not belong here, okay? I think I got one more slide. More beautiful homes, million-dollar homes, all subject to property value erosion. According to Realtor.com, like 16.9%. I think that's if you live over on Hitchcock Street. Okay? If you live where I live, it's more like taking $150,000 out of my pocket. Next slide, please. Highland Avenue yesterday. I don't know if the petitioner's ever been to the Historic Society or the Downers Grove Museum, but I sure have. That's a cart delivering ice to what I call the girls' home, who we lovingly embrace them and help them whenever we can, just like the rest of our neighbors. Some old Model A's. A street that has withstood the test of time. The walkway to Downers Grove, to downtown for families that want to have dinner or an ice cream or teach their kid how to ride a bike.
Brian, you got to wrap it up.
Last one. Highland Avenue tomorrow. There you go. A view from my patio with my garage before and then after. Photoshop the building in there. It's close, pretty close, but I don't have access to the time or the real software to do it justice. But I had a surveyor out in front of the house, and I actually got the dimensions of everything, so it's pretty darn close to what we would actually be seeing. One more, please. Oh, yeah. I got to the end of Highland Avenue, I turned left, and I got to see this, right? So is this what we want for Highland Avenue tomorrow? And I just have to say, please no. Please no, please vote no. I'm opposed to any zoning changes, any variances. Go ahead and build the gigantic commercial space for people that won't be there on Saturdays, they won't be there on Sundays, and it will never get built in the first place. That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
All right, before we go on, I don't know what to make of that. I don't know how many times I can ask please. There are like 40 people in the room, 40 people at 14 minutes apiece. You guys plan on taking this meeting to tomorrow? That's not the way we operate here, guys. We have intentionally a rule. We don't force it. You didn't hear me up here banging the gavel. But that's because I'm expecting that everybody will try and participate as citizens with each other, recognizing that each other has things to say too. We're not going to have a room where everybody goes for 15 minutes on some sort of a stroll down their thought process. If there are specific comments to deliver, please deliver them. Deliver them in 5 minutes, guys. Now, does anybody else have anything on this item before we move on? Some stirring, no? Okay.
Council, thank you for your time and your service. As you guys know, we've had multiple meetings. We've given in to every and any suggestion everybody's made here. We have had multiple meetings, 2 commission meetings, obviously a first reading. We've been dealing on and off with staff for over a year now. I'd like to reiterate, the only relief we are asking for is the underground parking. We have done soil borings. We do know what's going on with the property. And I do believe a lot of the things that are being mentioned up here are misinformation. That's concluded.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the board. My name is Bob Gudmundson. I'm a registered civil engineer in the state of Illinois and other surrounding states. I've been practicing site development engineering for 45-plus years, focused on development of residential, commercial, industrial, and office projects. I don't want to waste a lot of your time, but one of the early projects I did in this community was the Esplanade. All the site civil was mine. I was retained by this team to work on this project, and I can tell you there was a stormwater management report submitted with the preliminary plans as is required by your code and ordinances. In that report, we explain the fact that we store and basically push into a dry well in accordance with village criteria, 1 1/4 inches spread across the site, accumulates to 1,775 cubic feet of water. That gets captured with this development that is not captured today with the development of the land that is out there, but it is captured, it is put into the ground into a series of 48-inch diameter storm pipe, perforated pipe surrounded by gravel to promote vertical movement, or basically dissipation of stormwater. In the event that that fills up, the outlet pipe directs stormwater runoff west to Main Street, connecting to an existing storm sewer system in the village. So that's a quick update for you on the reality of what the stormwater approach is on this project. Thank you.
Anyone else on this agenda item? Okay, council comments or questions? Anyone?
I'll go first.
Chris, please.
Yeah, thank you. First, let me say that I do appreciate all of the feedback that I've received regarding this topic, including all of the information provided by staff, the petitioner, and of course the residents. As I've said from this seat before, I am sympathetic to both sides who I think are looking to protect their property and rights, and I understand the weight this decision carries for some of you and the impact that it has. I don't take any of that responsibility lightly. Prior to the topic coming before us last week, I visited the site multiple times. I met with residents who asked me to come by. I also met with the petitioner. I've listened to both Plan Commission meetings, read through all of the information that was provided. I've, again, also read all of your emails and do appreciate that feedback. And while I know that there are differing opinions on whether or not this building should be built, the fact of the matter is that we do have zoning ordinances that are a reflection of what this council, both previous and current, sought and seek for our village. The challenge before us as a council is that in this particular case, meaning this particular area of the downtown, the zoning recommendations set forth by the comprehensive plan, which sets the vision for our village, was not ultimately applied to our zoning codes. So it's my opinion that this is a case of where our comp plan and our zoning appear to be misaligned. I think there's been some added confusion because there is a formal zoning district called downtown transition. The comprehensive plan also refers to areas as downtown transition. These are not the same. And in this particular location, the comprehensive plan puts this area in question, puts the area in question into the downtown transition category. But when the comp plan was adopted and the zoning was reflected to make the change according to the plan, this particular area was not zoned downtown transition. As we know, it remained downtown business. and all of the rights and allowances afforded to the property in the downtown business district remain with these properties. So while I may be curious about why this particular area was not zoned DT or downtown transition formally, I'm not sure that the curiosity is relevant, because at the end of the day, we must make decisions within the confines of what the current ordinances allow. And as I see it, except for the underground variance, I believe this building does meet the standards of its current zoning district. I do think it's important to note that the revisions the petitioner has incorporated since the original plans were submitted. The southeast corner of the building was brought within setbacks, so no variance required there. This effectively eliminated 3 units to the building, reducing its density by 12.5%. The petitioner agreed to remove the outdoor dining in the rear, agreed to remove balconies on the top floor, also agreed to work with our arborist to ensure that tree preservation around the borders and on the subsequent adjacent property was a priority. They also agreed to an 8-foot fence, privacy fence. And while many of these accommodations were brought forth at our last meeting, I believe we as a council were merely a conduit to the concessions that neighbors adjacent and other residents requested. They are a direct reflection of what many of us on the council heard from the adjacent and other residents. It's not everything, but it addresses a lot of the concerns that we heard. And along with the stormwater and parking requirements being met, this building also meets our relatively new downtown design guidelines. Guidelines developed by architects and members of our historical groups that were put together to include a number of requirements on materials, color, facade, and other expectations from a design standpoint. And finally, anything built in this space would have to be a minimum of 32 feet. And while this building exceeds the minimum by 12 feet, I do believe it is a better option than exceeding it by 48 feet. And while I would be very surprised if this petitioner, during a time of office vacancies all over the country, would be interested in building a 70-foot office building here, what might happen 5 or 10 years from now with another petitioner could be that. Allowing this 4-story apartment building, I think, helped prevent that, and I believe will ultimately be a positive addition to our village. And in this current revised state, I intend to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else care to weigh in? Nicole?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. This topic has weighed very heavily on my mind these past couple weeks. A couple things that stand out to me and what I feel like is a lack of information are, I think, a more detailed information on a traffic study, insufficient information on parking for particularly restaurant patrons, not necessarily residents, and a potential precedent for what I see as breaking the block. I drive past this site multiple times a day, and I drove past it again on Sunday, and I just, as I'm looking out my car window, I cannot picture this in this space. While I appreciate the changes that the petitioner has made, including removing the outdoor dining, just because it is removed now does not mean that the petitioner cannot come back at a later date and request that it be put back in, and that's a concern of mine. PUDs are zoning's way around things. This is not something that we have to approve or allow in this space. We do have control over this. As I stated last Tuesday, sometimes these things come before us and our hands seem to be a little bit more tied. In this case, I don't believe they are, and I believe that I'm here to represent the residents as much as possible, always, and that is what I'm trying to do here this evening. One of the public comments was thinking about and going with your gut, and I have had this gut feeling, gut reaction as I have continued to go through this information. And that is what I feel like I need to go with tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Leslie?
I agree with most of what Commissioner Wallace said. I think that given that this is a PUD and a special use, we can lean a little bit more heavily on the comp plan than we do in other cases. Knowing that in the comp plan, this area is transitional, knowing that, again, the zoning is downtown business, which I'm familiar with. I do have a concern with it backing up to the residential neighborhoods. I do appreciate the detail that I got on the stormwater. I still have some concerns with, whether it be the grading of the property or I'm not sure where the location is, so I'm sure you can clarify that for me. I do have concerns with the trees, with the underground garage. I appreciate that the forester is going to come take a look at that, but I still do worry over time that we might lose some trees on the boundary. And for those who have been paying attention to our priority action items, that was something that I was very interested in trying to protect. I also concur that even in 5 years, I'm not sure how likely it's going to be for a large office building to move in there. I do think that while the landlord might not be as concerned with the parking, because again, we don't have to, in the downtown business, plan for parking for the businesses, I think that any tenant who would come in would be concerned for their employees, for traffic, for ease of parking. And that's not something that we have to worry about quite as much with the restaurants. It's something that I'm concerned with for the restaurant, but it's not something that a petitioner could necessarily be as concerned with as, say, an employer. So I have concerns with stormwater, I have concerns for trees, I have concerns with parking and traffic. And I just don't know that this is going to be beneficial to the residential neighborhood. And again, as Commissioner Wallace stated, because we do have a little bit more control over this, I just don't think I can support this as is. As some residents said, I also feel a little bit as though this was pushed pretty quickly. I wish I could have more conversations about if we do feel like a restaurant is the best space here. And again, not something that we can necessarily control, but these are conversations that I would like to have further with the developer, and do wish that we could take a little bit more time here. So in the context of everything that's happening and how quickly this has moved, I just cannot support this at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Greg, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I want to start by thanking everybody who's come out tonight and in previous weeks. The neighbors who've reached out directly to me for engagement have been incredibly thoughtful and open-minded, and I thought presented their arguments on the code and the comprehensive plan very well, and showed an understanding of the regulations that many in many ways do not. I also want to thank the developer who made a number of changes to this project in an effort to meet the neighbors' concerns. With the move of the cafe to the front, the protection of the boundary trees, and the elimination of certain of the east-facing balconies, 3 significant concerns have been met. As a result, I believe the standards under the zoning code are met. There have been some comments about the PUD, and it provides flexibility, and that's true, but it also is what provides us teeth. It's also what gave us the ability to say to the developer, we don't want the cafe in the back, we want it in the front. We want you to eliminate certain of the balconies, things of that nature. When you take a step back, you could, as has been discussed, a much taller building could go on this site. It would be somewhat narrower. But there also could be, for example, a one-story restaurant with a large outdoor cafe that could go in by right. There would be no oversight by this council, because it's the development of the PUD and the residential portion of it that requires the hearing before the Plan Commission and before us. That would not be the case if we were talking about just a commercial development, just a restaurant. And I think that's important to note. We have seen 2 Plan Commission meetings, 2 neighborhood meetings, and now a first reading and a active agenda item before our council. That's as much or more as any other petition gets. Most don't get 2 neighborhood meetings, most don't get 2 Plan Commission meetings. There are reasons behind the second Plan Commission meeting, but it was necessary and it was provided. I don't see where additional conversation about whether a restaurant works there or additional conversation about the project itself is really going to make much of a change. At this point, the standards are met. I would like to go back, though, once this is complete, and discuss the parking regulations in and around the surrounding area. I think the impact on the neighborhood is potentially great, and I'd like to find a way to mitigate that to the fullest extent possible. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. What else? Rich?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to mirror the comments of Commissioner Gilmartin, Commissioner Jose, so I won't repeat most of that. I also do appreciate the residents and your respectful and thoughtful way of approaching it. That's not always the case, so it was refreshing to see that. I know you're passionate about it, and you articulated yourselves well. I also read all of the emails. Haven't gotten back to all of you yet. I intend to do that when time permits. And then I also appreciate the builder, third generation Downers Grove builder, bringing this to us. What I would like to comment on was the legislative intent. We are a legislative body. This is our executive body seated here. So we are the board of directors of this public corporation, and it's our responsibility to pass things like this. So I wanted to talk specifically to the intent, and I have some level of knowledge of this because I sat on the Plan Commission when this came before us. I also was not part of the ad hoc committee, the comprehensive plan ad hoc committee, but I'm fairly certain I attended all of those meetings. And one of the things that kept on surfacing is that unlike some places like Naperville, Glen Ellen, and Wheaton, we have a finite and landlocked downtown business district. And for many years, people thought that our business district started at Maple and went north to Burlington, only to find out, no, it's not been the case. Our northern boundary happens to be Franklin, and it has been for years. In this case, downtown business since June 7th, 2005, and several decades before that, it was B2 general business. And then what we talked about is the whole reason that various councils back to 1997, when TCD1 was passed, it became necessary to try to have enough economic development within Downers Grove so that we could keep our real estate tax revenues at an amount that covers about 30% of our annual budget. And we've continued to do that. And the greater good in doing that is it keeps our municipal tax rates within the 5 lowest within DuPage County. Now that's an advantage to you. It's also an advantage that draws people to our community, and the more people that are drawn to this community, that increases your property values, and a lot of people are counting on that increase so they can sell their properties and retire or move to Florida or even stay here and decide to move into one of these condos or apartments at some time in the future. So that was a strategy that had gone on. It was specifically discussed and decided that that Main Street block was to remain part of downtown business and that it would continue going to Franklin. Now I appreciate that has a direct impact on those residents, but I've also seen this petitioner really yield to the requests of the residents more than any I've seen in the 3.5 years I've sat up here, the 2 years before that on Plan Commission, and 2 years before that for the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so it showed that the petitioner was listening, wants to be a good neighbor. I was very concerned about the trees, so I asked if the petitioner would be willing to do root pruning. Root pruning is a long-time arborist tool that actually protects a large tree as opposed to just digging up the roots. And we don't have a requirement to do that within Downers Grove unless it was in the parkway, and the petitioner also agreed to do that. So, you know, we have to balance what we do up here. Nobody likes to get emails saying that they're totally disappointed with us and what we've done. But we also have a responsibility. We're the one body that can raise your taxes. And we can do it in a regressive way, which comes with the property tax, or we can do it in a discretionary way, which is food and beverage and sales tax. And our village happens to rely on those. Not for our benefit. We don't get a dime more than we set the budget for. A lot of people don't understand, well, the village is going to get all this extra money because of this. No, that's not the way it works. You will see in a few weeks that we will set our budget based on the requirements of our police department, our fire department, public works, getting water delivered to you, and other services that we deliver. Then at the end of the year, we will go out for levy, and they will levy only to that particular amount. So even though there will be an impact on these residents, there will be a greater good that's served by us continuing to have a vibrant downtown. The other thing is we are not allowed to discriminate against businesses that happen to be on the north side of the tracks. We have to treat them just as specially as we would those located on these businesses south of the tracks. And there's another reason for doing that. Just like when you bought your house and you thought, well, it may not be the perfect house for us, we may want to add an addition onto the back of it. You go into that transaction feeling certain that you're going to be able to do that. Well, when builders look at these things, they have to have some level of certainty that, oh, I'm going to be able to put a business in the business district. And, you know, they invest a lot of money in order to do that. And that's another thing, because if we have the reputation that the village council will just pull that zoning, they call that spot zoning, by the way, that would be very damaging to our village. So I understand that's not what a lot of you wanted to hear, but I do intend to vote for this, and that is the rationale behind it.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you, Mayor.
Danny?
Yeah, like Commissioner Colavini said, when learning of this development, I was too happy to hear that we may have the opportunity to extend the vibrancy of our downtown to the north side. You know, I feel like the density and the restaurants in particular have really done wonders for our community and increased the vibrancy of the downtown area. After hearing of the emotions and the concerns of the residents and the neighbors that directly abut this development, undoubtedly I understand that, and I think they warranted a deeper look into this, and I think that through the process we've all looked deeper into it, including the developer, and like Commissioner Gilmartin, Jose, and Colavini alluded to, I think he's listened and taken into consideration the feedback through a number of different measures, and for those reasons, I too am in support of this amendment.
Thank you. Any others? Other comments? All right. I think that the standards have been met. The criteria for PUD approval have been met. There are a variety of things that are to be considered. Those things have all been considered by the Plan Commission, the Plan Commission review, and then subsequently this council. And I think the current plan presented before us makes me confident that those standards have been met. I won't repeat what my colleagues have said, but I do want to highlight the process. This is exactly the process that this entire community is governed by. Planning, comprehensive planning, community involvement in that planning process, public review of those plans and those documents and zoning changes. That all happened, as you guys know, before this consideration. And then when there's a change or a request made, there's a petition submitted, then there's again an entire process that starts, and it starts with the Plan Commission, and it's a series of hearings. And some of you may recall that early on when I was contacted, I asked people for some time, that I wanted to react and get into conversations after I saw what was really presented to this body, because things do change. And that's exactly what we've seen. It is seldom enough change for immediate neighbors. immediate neighbors to almost any development. It's true of new houses, too. They don't have to come before us because they tend to be by right, but talk to community development, code enforcement people, and neighbors by construction sites. People are seldom happy with the change, and it's because the big house went next to the little one, or the big house covered way more yard than the other one did, and I'm worried about my stormwater. And these are the challenges that a community that's trying to develop, and a community that's trying to stay relevant and vibrant has. And they are seldom decided perfectly. That's just the truth, guys. For those of you that have lived here many years, Vince, I know you've been here a long, long time, there are developments that felt good and developments that felt lousy. And yet we're all here to talk about it, and we're all dealing with a really solid community. Solid in many ways, some of the ways Rich talked about, but also solid in draw. People want to come to this community. They still see this as a community they want to be in, and that's no small feat because of all of this that has happened for the last 40 years. So I'm satisfied not only that the standards are met for approval of the PUD, but I'm also satisfied with the process. I realize that leaves developers with less revenue. I realize that leaves some residents dissatisfied with their view change, but I'm satisfied with the process that got us here, and on that basis, I think we should go forward. Any other comments from council? Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Nay.
Commissioner Wallace?
Nay.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That motion passes. Is there a motion concerning item B on our active agenda, a zoning ordinance change?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance rezoning certain property located at 4915, 4919, and 4923 Main Street, the Main Street Apartments, as presented.
Second.
Are any comments from the audience on this item? This is, of course, the same development. There are three parts to it. There is a PUD consideration, a zoning consideration, and a use consideration. If you have new comments to add, we'd certainly welcome those now. Okay, comments from the council? I'll only add that Commissioner Jose alluded to this earlier. This is a zoning change. It is not a traditional zoning change, meaning a zoning classification change, but rather an overlay of additional ability of the village to impose restrictions and control activities. And so that is part of what is going on as a function of this PUD. The underlying zoning still remains. With that, Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Nay.
Commissioner Wallace?
Nay.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That motion also passes. Is there a motion concerning item C on our active agenda, rezoning certain property?
It's actually D, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for Main Street Apartments Planned Unit Development Number 67 to permit multifamily residential as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Greg. Anyone from the audience want to talk about the use, the special use under consideration? Anyone from the council? Rich, please.
Yeah, I have a, oh, go ahead, Marshall.
Oh, sorry, Marshall.
I yield my time.
Since the process that Mayor Barnett talked about really does not allow for a give and take, I'll take this opportunity, given the way this is structured, to comment on some of the reasons that were given for this approval of this project. Mayor Barnett is right that this is a wonderful community that attracts people, but it attracts people because there's a balance, because this is a community that values, as a community, or has up until now, has valued history, has valued tradition, has valued neighborhoods like the one that is being destroyed tonight. And the problem with this proposal is that it evidences a strong prejudice that has set into this village to favor development and to favor developers without balancing those things that have made this a thriving community, have made this a very successful community. And as a result, the actions you're taking tonight fail to meet that obligation on the part of this council to protect the residents and to protect the legacy and the future of this village. And if you continue to break blocks like you're doing tonight, people will no longer come here because the character of the village is changing and will change adversely. The job is to preserve the character of the village. That doesn't mean to vote against all development, but it does mean to continue to balance that development. And unfortunately, the trend in recent years has clearly been contrary to that. And so I say this just in response. Obviously, no minds are going to be changed, but it's important to keep in mind when the next development comes before you and when the voters go to elect the members of this council, they need to realize that it's their vote that governs whether or not this trend continues. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the use in question? The levity is not all bad. Okay, any council comments or questions? Rich, I think you had something?
Yeah, I did have an editorial comment on special use, because this was one of the things I pushed for. There was actually discussions, and one of the iterations went back that residential and the downtown business could actually go in by right, and other plan commissioners felt the same way and pushed for that. And what that did was created this whole process where it went, these things go before the plan commission and they come before the village commissioners. And so it's important to know that even though some of you think that process was rushed, it is the process we follow, and it did give you the right to engage. If this were to go in by right, typically the way the residents would find out is when the fence goes up. So there's quite a big difference in that. So that's all I have to say.
Others? Just for clarity for those watching at home, one of the things our ordinance does require is a special use be granted to downtown DB, downtown business zoned properties when they're to be used in a residential manner. So in this case, the petitioner is asking for some residential use on this site. Some of the criteria associated with that to be considered have been reviewed and considered by all of us. I also find those to be consistent and met as it relates to residential uses in the downtown. I think it's a little bit, for me, it's a little bit separate from this particular parcel in that I think that is an appropriate use in all of our downtown. I would be hard-pressed to see a situation where that was not the case. So I'll be in favor of that on this parcel as well. Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Nay.
Commissioner Wallace?
Nay.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye, that motion passes as well. With Commissioner Jose's help to get back on track, that ends our active agenda. This takes us to item 7 on our agenda, which is our first reading portion of our meeting. This is the portion of the meeting where we will discuss items on which we do not plan to take formal action tonight. With that, I'll hand it over to staff. Dave?
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. There's only 2 items on tonight's first reading agenda. Both of them are ordinances establishing special service areas that would allow the village to collect property taxes on only the areas in these districts to maintain stormwater detention facilities if the homeowners association fails to do so. The revised process for the creation of these districts is such that this has been before the council numerous times. So Stan is here to answer any questions that the council may have on either of these items which have been presented previously.
Thank you. Any audience comments concerning these 2 SSA considerations? Special service areas. Council comments or questions? Only another clarification, if you haven't read the materials for tonight or are just tuning in for the first time, we do have a series of SSAs throughout the community which serve as backstops for things like a homeowners association that has responsibility for stormwater systems, so think detention basins, for instance, in a development. Should those not be maintained in such a way as to consistently work as we expect them to, we have the ability to levy the fees and funds necessary to do so as a village. So it's kind of a backstop issue. Dave, anything else?
That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
How about a manager's report?
We do have a manager's report, and I'm going to go a little bit off agenda and share some good news and an update on one of our top priority action items, which is our Civic Center project. Mike Baker, our deputy manager, has just done an exemplary job as the project manager on this immense project, such an important project. So I thought I'd offer him the opportunity to provide an update to the council with a little help from our folks that produced our short form videos, Doug Kozlowski, Chris Sturlow, and Janine Cerulli. Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Dave. The Civic Center project, among numerous benefits that it will generate for the community, will, enlarge that a little bit, result in construction of this combined facility that will house the police department, village hall staff and functions, and District 58 administrative functions as well, all under one roof. Construction has begun. It began in August. And while we're still early in the construction process, I am happy to report that the project is tracking on schedule and under budget. Construction activities to date have focused on site grading, utility installation, and excavation of the basement of the building. And we actually took some flyover video earlier today, which captured some of the construction. We will continue to provide regular updates to the council and community as this project moves forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Any questions for Mike on that Civic Center project?
I just have one. Will all of the updates include the same intense music, rock and roll music?
Good question.
It's a request.
Only if we're lucky. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention another key member of our video production team, Don Wilson, who you all know. I don't know if he contributed to this particular one, but is certainly a valuable member of our team in that regard. So thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else?
Any other questions?
Real quick, Mayor, I just wonder if Dave's office has become the popular spot to eat lunch and watch the construction out the window.
I cannot confirm nor deny that, but I can tell you that the best view is in the police department because the windows are right up next to the construction site. So perhaps I've gone over to the police department to watch some of the activities.
Anyone else? Mike, I will mention it. There's a long ways between here and the end, obviously. But we all have our walks, and this happens to be one of mine. I'm, I don't know, 1,000 feet from the site, and the number of trucks that can't make the Maple to Mackey turn is always entertaining. But the site management, from my observation, has been really good in terms of keeping stuff clean, keeping the streets clean, managing that traffic, because it's a pain, it's a construction site. But it looks so far like everything's really kind of ship-shape and squared off, and that's really good. So I hope that continues.
And with that, I'll go on to the item that does appear on tonight's manager's report. We do have a presentation regarding the Social Services Gap Analysis Report, which Mike is pulling up right now. My presentation tonight that you see here on the screen will include all the topics shown here on the screen, ranging from the goal of the Social Services Referral Program, how this program came about, the review of the Social Services Gap Analysis Report that was prepared by the Human Service Commission, and then this Village Council's actions and next steps regarding this project. Earlier this year, the Village launched a Social Services Referral Program. The goal of the program is to connect individuals in need of services with the agencies that provide these services. In doing so, the village seeks to increase awareness of the services and to increase access to those services. In the few months that this program has been operating, it has been an absolute overwhelming success. The referral program is the product of the Village Council direction and the recommendations that originated with the Human Service Ad Hoc Committee. The council created that committee a few years ago and asked them to make recommendations about the village's role in social services. The top recommendation was to create the referral program, and in late 2020, the council approved an action plan. The plan called for the engagement of professional staff, the relaunching of the Human Service Commission, and the development of the Social Services Referral Program. And all of these action items have taken place. The last action item is to identify gaps in service provision and to create strategies to address those gaps, which is the report that's being presented here tonight. The Village Council directed the Human Service Commission to prepare a report identifying gaps in the provision of services and strategies to address those gaps. The full report is included in the agenda materials that were posted online for tonight's council meeting. The report defines a gap in service and identifies 3 different types of potential service gaps as shown here on the screen. The council discussed these in some detail a few months ago when they directed this project. They are awareness gaps, acceptance gaps, and availability gaps, and I think their title really speaks to their definitions on the screen here. The second step in the report is to identify those gaps in services. Given the recent launch of the program and the original finding, we are operating under the assumption that public awareness of social services referral program is very low. This constitutes an awareness gap. No acceptance gap has been identified, as the acceptance rate of the referrals remains very high. And while the village has identified a service provider for each of the requested services, this report finds that additional information should be provided to the village to determine if there is an availability gap. However, one specific availability gap was identified by the Human Service Commission. Participation in the village's taxi coupon program for residents 65 years and older or with disabilities has declined significantly due to a lack of availability of taxis. The final step in the report is to develop strategies and recommendations to address those gaps. The top priority is to create a public awareness campaign. There are several recommendations about the dissemination of information to the public, partnering with other organizations, and using data to quantify and qualify an awareness gap moving forward. The report recommends that the Human Service Commission become a working board by operating information booths at community events. The report also includes a recommendation to request that service providers submit information to the village about wait times and scheduling, general schedule availability. And finally, the report contains many recommendations to increase senior residents' access to transportation, the taxi issue we identified earlier, including exploring partnerships with local community groups to provide rides to seniors, exploring partnering with local medical service providers, and exploring developing a senior subsidy program in partnership with rideshare companies such as Uber and Lyft. And now that the report has been presented to the council, 3 options have been identified for council action moving forward. The council could accept the report as drafted and presented here tonight, could accept the report with modifications as directed by the village council, or you could ask the Human Service Commission to do more work on this report and remand it back to them for specific changes. Once the council does accept the report, staff will work with the Human Service Commission to develop an implementation plan and a schedule. This work will likely be completed in the early part of 2023, and then staff would take the actions in the plan. This would take us into 2023 and beyond. It's been a pleasure to be the staff liaison to the Human Service Commission on this project and going back to the Human Service Ad Hoc Commission. I'm very pleased to present their work. Happy to answer any questions the council may have. And most importantly, we're looking for council direction on the specifics of this plan and where you'd like us to go next with this program. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Dave. Any comments, reactions? Leslie, please.
Yes. As someone who really championed the availability gap, I'm excited to see that there was a really meaningful spot where we can potentially make a difference for seniors, so I'm happy to see that. That is kind of the one spot where I'm struggling the most. I know, we talked in our meeting, and I've talked with a few folks in the community. The one spot of the Lyft Uber, I feel like there's a step before exploring partnering with, figuring out a partnership with Lyft and Uber to figure out if we can provide reduced rate rides. I would be more interested for that first step to be, is there a way that we can somehow engage the senior community to see if that's even something that would be feasible or would have any interest? To me, gauging the level of potential participation would be the step before engaging Uber and Lyft, because that's going to be a much heavier lift, and that was a bad pun. So I would be in favor of all of the senior residents' access to transportation, except I would just modify that one for Uber and Lyft to see if potentially, we can engage that population to see if that's even something that we should be spending time on. In terms of the rest of it, I am in favor of it. I know that we have not historically allowed boards and commissions to operate information booths or engage with public just because they're not official representatives of the village and would not be overseen by any of us. But I think there is a way for us to make that clear to the public that these folks are volunteers and are not staff, but are people who have volunteered their time and can share their experiences as a member on a board or commission and potentially at least hand out flyers so that more folks can be engaged with the social services referral program. So I am interested in at least going down the path, and I don't know if that means modifying the bullet to say explore, a way in which the Human Services Commission could operate information booths, but I am interested in having that conversation and moving down that path. So for me, I would accept it with the small modification that Lyft and Uber should be, let's engage the seniors first. Thank you.
Thank you. Rich?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner's comments on this thing. I like the report a lot. I was very pleased to see that we had primarily an awareness issue and not an acceptance issue or availability related to taxi companies. I mean, the simple fact of the matter is there are a lot less taxi drivers than there used to be in taxi services because of the rideshare organizations. And also, being the only senior citizen at this site, there's a big difference between somebody who's 65 and somebody who's 85 related to the use of these. So, and as I know from being a former Lyft and Uber driver, you need one of these in order to order those rides. So I would, I'd be in favor of remanding this issue in this report to the Human Services Commission and making them part of the solution. And I also think that in their drilling down on these issues and then also offering to volunteer, they'd be more valuable in their knowledge level. So that would be something I would recommend. But great job. I'm pleased to see that this thing is mostly working.
Thank you. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I think Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit did a really nice job of outlining the reasons why I don't want the Human Services Commission out there at various community outings. I would much rather send staff. I think we hired a social worker in order to do work like this, in order to reach out into the community and determine what the concerns are and try to connect people with the resources that are out there. I would rather have someone with demonstrated education and expertise in that area than a volunteer that may overstep, may not quite make the right connection. So I would absolutely draw a line through the idea of the Human Service Commission operating an information booth. With regard to transportation, I like the idea of engaging the senior community, but even before that, I'd like to see us engage the township and anyone else that might be engaged in rideshare for the senior and disabled community. While there might be a shortage of taxis, there are other resources that we can connect people with that could be used in the interim, at the very least, while we're looking at the remaining rideshare potential. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, thank you. I too want to echo the comments on the report. This is an ongoing and excellent continuation of the fine work of the committee. I think I'm just going to maybe split the baby here. I think on the human services folks working booths, I agree with both of you. I think the volunteers from the committee would be a great asset just in terms of people power and scale, but I also agree that there should be someone from staff at those. As Commissioner Jose said, we've hired a social worker. Feels like the right move. I might take a step back and say, what do we think the value of these live events in terms of our awareness and scale really is? There may be, I would like to think that there's perhaps a more one-to-many approach to how we can raise awareness. But I think if these are the ways that people really find these resources, I think I would want to maybe understand that a little bit more. But I think it's important to include members of the committee who want to help. But I do think there's an element of making sure we're providing it with the right direction. I think as it pertains to the ride share, I would be hard-pressed to think that we're the only ones in this situation, right? And so I think some of these recommendations I agree with, looking to the county. I think looking to the township is a great idea. And I can relate to the idea of the older generations not having cell phones. I think you would be surprised how many do. And so I think it would be important to at least look at what the possibility with some of these rideshare companies might be. I don't know that it's the ultimate solution. I agree that it's tricky, but I do know that they're always looking for ways to get into different markets and different solutions, and perhaps there's one that we're just not aware of. I'm not interested in the village necessarily managing that, but I think if there is a solution that can be fairly plug and play and replicate some of the couponing that we do, it feels like something worth looking into. I don't think there was anything else in here that I would have any issues with. I think it's a comprehensive look at what we need to do, and awareness is for sure critical, and to me that's a real area of focus, and how we do that I think can come in a lot of different ways. So I think those are my comments on feedback, what you might be looking for. Thank you, Mayor.
Well,
thank you, Mayor. I'm going to try not to be redundant. I agree with most of what Commissioner Jose mentioned, if not all of it, to be honest. But first, I want to thank the Human Services Commission. This has always been a group of very passionate people, and you can tell by all of the information and all of the thought that was put into this report. In terms of the rideshare companies, I'd like to leave that as a last resort and go to the township first, while not totally taking it off, but maybe putting that kind of lower on the list. And then in terms of the information booths, I agree with Commissioner Jose. We have a social worker. She's lovely. And I think we need to use her in as many places as we can. And I feel comfortable having someone who then also reports to staff, doing something like that. So those are my thoughts at the moment. Thank you.
thank you. Danny?
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to repeat too much of what my colleagues have already said, but I also agree with Commissioner Gilmartin. I'm not quite sure how much an informational booth out there is going to do. I realize, there's an awareness gap, but maybe continuing the path. I think this is a fairly new program, and continuing reaching out to some of these other organizations that we've been, and if we are going to have some type of booth out there, I agree with Commissioner Jose. It should probably be staff, if that's even feasible. As far as the transportation gap for the seniors, I think obvious reasons for that. I think we should reach out to the county and township before exploring Uber and Lyft. And yeah, that's it.
Good. Thank you. I think what I'm hearing up here as it relates to this community events thing, I'm not going to say the whole point, but no small part of what our goal in even getting this crew back together was to raise awareness, to make sure that people found the help that they need that oftentimes is already out there. And so I don't see how this should just be eliminated. I mean, Chris raises a good point. Is it useful? Does it end up being productive? We don't want to do any of these things if they end up not being productive. But the idea that we would, test a couple of them, that we would use our staff, our paid professional team, if the team feels like it needs additional help, they can certainly ask for volunteers. But being in that booth ready to help direct people or to get a bunch of input on something we're missing seems like worth trying. I don't, it may be the kind of thing that we do 2 or 3 of them and Heather comes back saying, I stand there twiddling my thumbs the whole time, and then we'll move on to something else. But the main point of this entire effort was to get people the help they need. And if those events are out there and available and willing to let us just be available to people, I think we ought to take a run at it. But I think it should be our staff that's ready to actually help. On the other issue, which is senior transportation, I don't feel like I know enough here. What we know is we know that our coupons aren't being used. We don't know that there's, what was the number here? If we look at 19 and consider that sort of last normal year to now, we don't know what happened to the 17,000 rides that didn't happen via the coupon system. We don't know that those just didn't happen. And then I struggle a little bit with, if we're trying to connect dots, we're trying to connect needs with people who are providing services, we do know that the township is providing services. We know some of these folks are already doing just that. So I'm a little bit missing the point. Maybe I'm just being thick, but we're trying to identify gaps. We found that our coupons weren't being used, but we do know other people who are providing ride services to seniors. I guess I'd like to know, maybe if Rich used the word remand, but understanding what are, to Leslie's point, finding out from the seniors, what are they seeing? What are they actually experiencing? Would they use Uber and Lyft? Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. Are they using some other service? Mm-hmm. Maybe they are. Probably all those rides didn't get taken, but I kind of doubt that all of them were also missed. So I just, before I want to get into us doing anything as a partnership, I want to understand what is actually happening, beyond just that our coupons weren't used. So that's my thinking. Chris,
yeah,
please
if I could just add, that's helpful. I think if we look at this as a marketing exercise, right, we need to think about the focus group. And I don't know if we have access to those who were using the coupons before, but is there a tendency to know, maybe we pick 5 or 10 folks that are either heavy users or were at one time and were not, and just try to get some kind of litmus test of where they may be finding. We may find a totally different need there. I think that makes a ton of sense to me. And I think also, in terms of all the things that we want to try to get the awareness out, to the mayor's point, I think there are, it is marketing. We're going to have to test some things. It isn't just a matter of picking one or picking two. I think we've got a great in-house team that does great stuff with video and Facebook stuff that could help consult on just some very blocking and tackling things to raise awareness, rather than trying to pigeonhole us into one thing. So it feels like maybe a little more understanding about, again, how are we going to be able to get the most exposure in a way that is scalable, which I've already said, but I feel like I need to say again. Thanks.
So I'm kind of hearing that probably there's another round of human service attention that's needed without maybe even taking some specific steps.
Yeah, I think we have some proposed changes directed by the council. We'd like the opportunity to consult with staff and perhaps the Human Service Commission and come back with some revisions to make sure we're capturing the council direction and then move forward from there.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mayor and Council, for all the direction on this report. I again want to thank everybody in the Human Service Commission on this.
Before Commissioner Gilmartin continues on, I did want to say something, but go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry, in that, I forgot this point. We are also keeping statistics on what services are being leveraged, right?
Yes.
So I think we could also probably use some of that information to let us know what means are going to be the best ways to communicate with these people. So if there's a struggle with being homeless, doing a digital campaign to drive that is probably not going to be as effective as other means. So that can also, I think, I would suggest, be a data point of where are the breakout of the services, maybe where do we have the top 2 or 3, and then how can we most effectively communicate with those people? And that is it. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. I do want to add one thing. If you are on the Human Services Commission, or you know somebody is, or you know somebody who knows somebody is, say thank you. In 1 year, approximately, we had 459 referrals, 380 of them resulted in people accepting services. We know whether it's suicide, whether it's depression, whether it's substance abuse, we know that when people get into trouble, it affects way more than just them. It affects their family, it affects their neighbors. So this is probably 1,000 or more people, or at least 300 or 400 families who have gotten help in a way that 2 years ago they might not have. And so the team that put that together, and certainly Heather and her team, thank you. This is important work that's done, and it's done in a way that is really truly helping people. So I thought that was important to note.
Well said, Mayor. That ends the manager's report this evening. Thank you.
Attorney's report. Enza, do you have anything for us?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Only 2 items to present tonight. The first is an ordinance establishing special service area number 12, and the second is an ordinance establishing special service area number 13. They'll both be on the November 1st active agenda. That is all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Item 10 on our agenda tonight is the public comments portion. This is the portion where we're looking for comments on subjects not on the active or first reading agenda. As a reminder, this is an opportunity to address the council and not necessarily debate, but please come on down and let us know what's on your mind.
Marshall Schmidt, 4923 Sealy. I want to address 2 process points. The first goes to the comments that the mayor made about the person who went on for a few minutes over the limit. This is a person who's lived in this community for, I think, 34 years is what he said. And I think conducting a session like this, when you don't give the opportunity of people who are in that position to fully vent their thoughts, is, in all candor, offensive. There is a huge disparity of power, which I have spoken to in the past, and having been cut off by this council in the past, having 5 minutes to express things on things that are as important as what's going on in that neighborhood is inappropriate. And the village council should change its procedures to ensure that those people get their opportunity. The second point I'll make goes to a substantive issue, but also a process one. When this council approved the plan to build a new village hall, one of the main selling points was that the village was not going to have to spend or not have to raise any more taxes to pay for that project, that it was well within the levy and well within the ability to do it. Part of the plan was to rent space to the school district. A lease was negotiated in which rent would be paid over 25 years. Last month, the school board announced that it was paying 25 years of rent in advance with a $500,000 payment. If you do the present value calculation, that means that the school board is going to lose between $1.6 and $3.2 million. And the effect of that payment is it's going to help finance the building of the village council and the new village hall, excuse me. And the problem I have with this process is this was not transparent. It appears that there was some kind of deal, either implicit or explicit, cut so that the school board would help finance the building of the new village hall. Now, that may be perfectly appropriate because they're going to be a tenant. Okay, so that may be perfectly appropriate. But what's not appropriate is hiding how money is passing between these village institutions to pay for a village hall and statements being made about what the advantages or disadvantages are. At the information session on Saturday, the school board said, but the lease allows us to pay this in advance. But it doesn't require it. They're doing it gratuitously. And the reasons that were given at the school board meeting for gratuitously transferring $1.6 to $3.2 million in present value from the school board, while the school district is asking for $179 million from the community to the village, without explicitly disclosing that or discussing it or making it available for public comment, is terrible. It's a terrible way to govern. It's a terrible way. Now, maybe I'm missing something, but when I raised it with the school board, no one stood up and said, oh, we're doing it because of X, Y, and Z. The only reason it was given is it benefits the taxpayers of the village. But it takes money from the kids. This village is taking money from the kids while the school board is asking for $179 million without transparency, without engagement of the community. And I object to that. As a resident of this community, one who's committed to the schools and to the community in general, there needs to be more transparency on deals like this. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Louise Kelly. I'm a DG resident, and I want to thank everybody on the council for all your time and attention that you've given tonight and all meeting nights to everybody's issues and matters. That being said, I'd like to talk about an initiative of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus called the Greenest Region Compact. So this is a charter that was developed locally through the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, of which I believe we're a part of, that states 49 high-level goals, and these consensus goals guide municipal action. They support mayors in their role as environmental leaders. They foster collaboration between the communities that have positive impacts on sustainability in this region. My understanding is that this council has decided not to enlist Downers Grove in this compact. But I couldn't find any meeting minutes about this decision, so it's unclear to me as a resident how this decision came about. I'd like to ask that this decision be revisited by the council. Our neighboring communities are showing environmental leadership and cooperation with one another by joining this compact. I'll name just a few: Westmont, Lisle, Lombard, Willowbrook, Darien, Naperville, Aurora, LaGrange, Villa Park, Oakbrook. Almost all of our neighboring communities are a part of this Greenest Region Compact. And the list goes on beyond that. I just wanted to name our direct neighbors. So community obviously can do more than a single person, and communities working together can make an even larger impact. And I'd like to suggest that we join the Greenest Region Compact with our neighbors and make a dent on our collective carbon footprint. In addition to joining, I'd like to ask you to solicit public opinion on this matter. Thank you.
Others?
Good evening. I'm Carol Richard, and I'd like to add my voice to Louise Kelly's and ask, in addition to the request of joining the Greenest Regions Compact, ask that our Environmental Concerns Commission here in Downers Grove be reinstated. It is not operating right now from what I can gather, and I think because of the time we're living in, and the problems the world has. We have this global climate change occurring. There isn't a reason for us to discontinue the Environmental Concerns Commission. And I do believe there are a number of citizens, a great number of citizens in Downers Grove who would like to see this commission functioning and maybe even in a greater capacity than it functioned previously. And by that I mean maybe a commission that reports to the council and is regularly reporting to the council. And what would they report? They would report ideas for making this community more sustainable. They would perhaps be a liaison between the village and the Greener Regions Compact, if we join that, and if it entails more work. And it would contribute ideas, contribute help to the commission and to all of Downers Grove in increasing our sustainability. And what we mean by, or what is meant by sustainability, is the ability to have our needs met with our resources that are available in such a way that our future citizens can also have their needs met by the resources that are available. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Okay. Mayor's report for tonight. We have a process here which is imperfect. I don't think anybody, this mayor or probably the last 15, would say it's perfect. But we do try and find a way to accomplish a variety of things that are sometimes competing. And that is moving public policy forward, making public policy decisions, taking input on those decisions, and actually making progress on a meeting. So while some might wish to speak longer than others, there has not been a time that I'm aware of, at least in my time up here, which counts 3 mayors, where people have not gotten to say their part, even tonight. Despite the fact that it wasn't inconsistent with the plans that we have laid out and the way we try and run a meeting, people still got to speak their mind. To suggest that somehow asking for others to allow for others to speak, to suggest that asking others to not try and commandeer the evening is somehow inappropriate or quashing of public input is, what was the word we heard not long ago? Poppycock, I think, was the one that was thrown at us from one of those meetings where we were listening to public input. That's what it is. Everybody that has come to these meetings for at least a decade has had every opportunity to provide their input to this council and will continue to have that. At the same time, your village government will try and have meetings where we get work done. And so we will continue to ask people to try and keep it down, to try and let others have a chance. We didn't have that tonight, but there have been meetings. Some folks up here were part of them, some may not have been, where we talked about everything from marijuana to Maple Avenue, where we had 100 people in the room. And we pushed meetings off, decisions off to other times to make sure that we got through everybody speaking. But you can't give 100 people 15 or 20 minutes on their own slideshow. Process that for a minute. So we are always interested in public input. We always take it all, but we are asking everybody to be neighborly. Think about each other. That's probably enough on that. Rich, anything for us this evening?
Yeah, I'm going to take the liberty to comment on that. I don't have any goings-on to report, but I've also been in the position of being at that podium and sometimes had to struggle with keeping my comments to 5 minutes. But I learned some time ago that the average human being speaks at 150 words per minute. And if you put your document in Word and you cut it off and edit it down to 750 words, you'll be able to get everything in 5 minutes. And sometimes you just have to be concise. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Leslie?
No report, Mayor.
Nicole?
No report, Mayor.
Danny?
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Chris?
No report, thanks.
Craig?
Mayor, just real quick, I'd like to point out that the lease with District 58 is available on our website at downers.us. It was, it looks like I clicked away from the meeting that it was on. Give me 1 second, July the 5th it was on the agenda. And it calls for annual payments. If District 58 is going to pay differently, that's up to them. Thank you, Mayor.
I'm glad to hear that wasn't hidden. We are not going to adjourn. We're going to move to executive session. Is there a motion to move to closed session?
Mayor, I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C3 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider the selection of a person to fill a public office which the Village Council is given power to appoint under law or ordinance.
Second.
Any comments from council before we do so? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Burnett?
Aye. That motion passes. We will reconvene in closed session. We will not return to council chambers at the end of the evening. Thank you and good night.